Hi everybody, it's Abigail Lockwell here. Happy Halloween. So before we get into this week's creepy video, I'm going to do a very quick unboxing from the Black Needle Society. And I also, she's not going to like me for this, have my little fluffy black co-host Midnight, who is present with me for this unboxing. I don't know if she'll actually be here during the actual recording of the creepy story, but you never know, she might be. There we go. My little black cat magic. And now Midnight's like, Mum, now you gotta give me love. Right, so we're gonna get into this. This is a special subscription based service, and they occasionally do these fun little boxes, these special boxes. So obviously like Frogwarts was one, and this one is their treat box. They offered a trick one, which I believe was Stephen King themed, and like the image they used to advertise that was sort of similar to it, and I don't like clowns, so there was no way I was getting that. So I went for the treat box. Okay, that was the Erin cupboard. So yeah, I went for the treat box. So yeah, let's get into this. Ooh, ooh, this looks pretty. Yep, it is exactly what I thought it was. See? Treat box. So. Yeah. Right, so, I'm gonna guess this is specialty floss. Yeah, it is. Oh, it's almond M&Ms. So we have got pumpkin spice potion. Okay. Poison lemonade. Okay. What's this? Sleepy Hollow. Cute, I like that colour. Ghoul's Blood. And what's this? Beetlejuice. I've never seen Beetlejuice, but that's pretty. That's pretty. I like that one. I'm gonna have to find something to use that with. This is, ooh, is this a cookie or something? I think it is. I'm gonna read what this pumpkin thing is. Jack-o'-lantern cookie. Yep, it is a cookie. So yeah, I'll have to try that at some point. I might try that during the video, so that'll be fun. Ooh, what's this? This is, oh, it's a candle. Happy Halloween. Ooh, ooh, okay, that's quite nice. Go, so we've got candle. Green apple, peach, pear, cinnamon, clove, tonka, vanilla, and cider. Ooh, that's gonna be nice. I keep looking at this cookie and I keep thinking I want to eat it, but I know I've got dinner coming up soon. Ooh. Hello. Oh, we got a floss ring! You can hold all your flosses. Does it say spooky stitchery? I like that. So that's the jewellery, and then there's the ring. So I'm going to actually pop that on there. And then what have we got here? What else have we got? Oh, that's cute. So this is from the Frosted Pumpkin Stitchery. I love it. It's candy corn. That's cute. I like that one. And we have, oh, that's cute. A candy headband. I like that. What's this? What is this? Oh my gosh, I think these are like zipper things that you will put on a zipper, so I like that. So we have Frog Be Gone. Oh, that's cute. We've got a cross-stitching ghosty. And finally, I love this one. We have a tabby cat with a witch's hat on called Stitch Please. I like those. I like those. What's this? Okay, so this is Sweet Treat 32 count linen by Mystic Fabrics. That's cute. It's a nice sort of greeny colour. I like that. Ooh. Oh, we have a ghosty project bag with a nice vinyl front, nice back. So it's got pumpkins and cats and stones. I like that. I'm gonna have to pop something in that. What's this? Oh, is this like a bat? Is this like that Holy Juice Potion one? What I have? Yes, it is. Oh, we have another massive stitch bag. Not useful. Mum will be like looking at me like, Abigail, are you sure you have enough cross stitching bags? No. Oh, we've got some. Oh, we got project stickers. They're cute. I like those. And then, oh, we've got the pattern from the Frosted Pumpkin Stitchery. Happy Halloween. I like that. That's really, really cool. Is that everything? I'm pretty sure that is everything. So now that we have unboxed that, I will... Oh, that was Josh. We will go to the original... We will go to our regularly scheduled program. Well, hello everybody, it's Abigail Lockwell here and welcome back to the second part of this creepy story. So my last creepy story was obviously going into the folklore of vampires. This is the second part of that, and we are going to go into the Highgate vampire. So I'm very excited about this, and happy Halloween for those who celebrate. But without further ado, we are going to get straight into it. So, like I say, we're going to be covering Highgate Vampire. And so, this particular vampire entity is said to roam the London cemetery of Highgate. So, before we're going to get into the actual main story, we should probably go into a little bit of the background of why Highgate was built and how it came to be known. So basically, for those of you that sort of aren't in the UK, there was a massive issue, especially in the City of London, of the cemeteries being overcrowded. And also it's worth to mention that Highgate was actually built in the Victorian era, so it's obviously got that really beautiful Gothic architecture, and there are also some bits that are they look Egyptian as well. But yeah, for nearly 2,000 years, London had a massive issue with overcrowding. Now, like I say, in the Victorian era when it was built, there were so many taxes. And one of these was when you died, so the funeral tax. So basically, your family would get taxed for your death and burial, and as a result, a lot of the poorer communities couldn't really afford to really bury their dead in a respectful manner. So what ended up happening all the way from like the Roman era, especially in the Middle Ages, this was done, people would just dump their relatives' bodies in the River Thames. Now, for those people in America, this is spelled Thames. I did watch a video a couple of weeks ago where someone in America said Thames, even though it's basically spelt Thames, it is pronounced Thames. That's Old English for you. And in the Victorian era, fishing out bodies from the Thames was sort of a daily occurrence. You basically fish about one body a day out of the Thames. But no, so like I say, you were basically taxed for everything. You were taxed for the amount of children you had. Even window tax was a thing at one point. Seriously. Like I say, the Victorian era, basically everything was taxed. And there goes Erwin's Viv. It's fine. It's fine. So, yeah, like I say, so sort of in the 1800s, the burial, the death crisis, as it were, the people that were sort of being buried, it was starting to stretch beyond the capabilities of the graveyards. So before the Burial Act, they basically, if somebody died, you had to be buried in a church cemetery. There were no other cemeteries around that you could be buried in. And so as a result, people, it was getting all overcrowded. Also at the time, body snatching was a massive thing. And, that the Autonomy Act that came into the UK at the start of the 20th century, that was obviously a massive thing that's basically made grave robbing and body snatching illegal. But yeah, like I say, in 1852, the Burial Act came in, where I believe it was the Secretary of State, I think it was, signed off on an act that made it possible for people to be buried in the city but not in a churchyard. So they basically designed, there were 7 cemeteries built, Highgate being one of them, and these would become known as the Magnificent Seven. And a lot of people do actually go and visit them today. they have become major tourist attractions, which is, you know, it's a very strange thing to sort of, you know, go to London and decide that, you know, oh, we're gonna go and visit a graveyard. And I mean, honestly, the architecture, the Gothic architecture of these graveyards is very beautiful. It was, you know, the Gothic architecture was very much in the Victorian era, and there are even bits, especially in Highgate, that are sort of Egyptian-y, as it were. So yeah, it's, you know, the Victorians, you know, had a very interesting sort of, you know, architectural style. So there are actually two parts to Highgate Cemetery, and they are built on either side of Swains Lane. So you have the west side of Highgate Cemetery, which was built in 1839, and then 21 years later you had the east side built, which was in 1860. Now, like always, you know, like I say, burying your body was always, you know, a big thing. And in Highgate, because it is sort of such a sought after place to be buried, there are quite a few people that are buried there. One of the most well known, get my words out, is Karl Marx, and also more fairly recently George Michael was buried there. Originally his family did want to keep, George Michael's family did want to keep it private. However, there have been some fans that have gone to pay respects to the singer, and they have actually published where his gravesite is in the actual, like, on photos that they've taken, which in my mind is, you know, it's a little bit disrespectful. If the family, you know, the family did not want, excuse my dad, the family did not want his grave to be public knowledge. You know, it's not even published on the map of where it is, and there have just been a few people that have decided to take photos, you know, of the grave and everything, and as a result people have basically figured out where it is. But no, yeah, like I say, you know, it's a very sort of sought after place to be buried. The graves are very, very packed together, and it has been speculated that at least 170,000 bodies are actually buried there. Like I say, this includes Karl Marx and George Michael. It even Charles Dickens' parents are buried in Highgate. Who else is buried there? There's a female poet that's buried there. Can't remember her name. But yes, like I say, the cemetery, you know, is very crowded. There actually aren't a lot of spaces that are available. You can't actually like pre-pay for a site. Basically, the moment you die, you have to request a plot saying, look, I've got this relatives that's just died, you know, we need a space. And it's only really in sort of exceptional circumstances. So if, say, somebody has cancer, you will be allowed to, like, prepay for a plot then, obviously, because you don't know when said person is going to die. You know, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week. But yes, and sort of over the centuries there has been local folklore has built up about the cemetery, and there have obviously, you know, it has rumoured to be the site of hauntings. So people have sort of seen apparitions and ghostly spectres apparently rising from their graves. Which, you know, with a graveyard, there is something very creepy about it. About a graveyard. I mean, I've got a graveyard that is a little bit behind my house, that way. Which I did say, which I have touched on in the past, which was where one of my cats was mutilated after being hit by a car. You know, I did used to go into that graveyard because, you know, I used to walk through it sometimes, but I don't really like even going near it, to be honest. Now it's too painful to even like go near. And also it's yeah, you know, I would go in there to sort of look at the war graves and stuff. That'd be my sort of only reason for going there. I'd just like sort of make sure that the dead knew that they weren't, you know, forgotten. But anyway, moving on from that, there are World War graves in the in Highgate as well. So going on to the war, actually, during World War II, during the Blitz, the cemetery was actually badly damaged in some places, to the point that some graves, you know, were badly damaged. And, you know, because obviously we'd just gone through a world war, sort of restoring the cemetery wasn't really a massive priority, and it became very overgrown. So families that were trying to visit loved ones' graves would apparently be fighting through the undergrowth to even try and find family plots. There would also, like I say, you would also find that there was a lot of tarpaulin out in the cemetery because they weren't, you know, looking after the graveyard. So they just decided to throw tarpaulin over the exposed bodies, and this really caused, you know, it did smell of decay. And, you know, it did become quite unpleasant for a while. Like I say, it really fell into disrepair. And, you know, this was in the 1970s, so we've obviously jumped forward a little bit. This is when, like, sort of all the stuff really started to happen again. Like, the late 60s, like, early 70s is when everything started to sort of happen again in Highgate. So yeah, and as a result of graves being left open and no one really So as a result of people, you know, not really taking care of the graves and, you know, bodies still being strewn out, this became, you know, this grave robbing started up in the area, and also vandalism increased. And as a result, it was about this time that when all the occult activity started to really sort of flare up in the area. You know, graveyards always attract, especially like these big gothic graveyards, always attract sort of, you know, people that sometimes are really up to no good. and like I say, this occult activity started happening, especially devil worship and necromancy. That was massive. You know, people would come in and they would find, you know, bits of people's skeletons, you know, strewn over the place, or even in some cases, some of the bodies would be, you know, removed altogether. So in the sort of around the late 1960s, whispers started to go around of a tall, dark entity around Highgate, and this caught the attention of a man called David Farrant. Now, he's one of two really key players in the Highgate vampire story. And Farrant was a psychic medium and a white witch. And he was actually contacted by two people because he founded the British Psychic and Occult Society, and he was contacted by two people. One was an accountant who was in the graveyard. It was sort of late afternoon when this happened. He probably, I'm not sure if it was like after work. It doesn't really say what he was doing, but most likely it was either after work or most likely he was visiting the grave of a family relative. This was before. This was when the graveyard was like open to the public and you didn't have to buy a ticket to get in, which, you know, I don't agree with them making, you know, it like a profitable place, sort of charge people entry to get in, you know, and you can buy a ticket, I think it's from the west side, that will allow you to enter both cemeteries. But yeah, it's, you know, it has become, like I say, it's become a major tourist attraction, but this was done way before they decided to like ticket people, because they have guides and stuff there, and yeah. So this was like long before they decided, you know, to do this whole entry thing. You know, anyone could go in, really. And like I say, this accountant, he was most likely visiting a deceased relative's grave, and it was late afternoon. And he decided, and he suddenly just got this uneasy feeling. So, you know, he started to make his way out of the graveyard, but he got lost. He then started to hear the clock strike 5. So he was like, well, okay, I should probably follow the sound of the bell and I'll get to the main gate. So while he was leaving, trying to find his way out, he suddenly became aware of a presence that was watching him. So he turned around and he saw floating off the ground, sort of about 600 meters away, was this tall, dark figure. And it appeared to be wearing a cloak. He locked eyes with this entity. Sorry, I've got my memory stick that's in front of me, that's what I'm playing with. They locked eyes and he just felt this feeling of being frozen. he felt this feeling as though his body was just being drained of energy, and he was just frozen like this for what he believes was probably only a couple of minutes. And then sort of as quickly as it had appeared, it suddenly disappeared, and he managed to find his way out of the graveyard. And the second witness got a little, didn't get as much detail. Yeah, she was walking her dog. An elderly lady was walking her dog down Swains Lane. When they were approaching the sort of the gates of the cemetery, her dog suddenly started whining and howling like it was distressed. So she started to have a little look around, and then she looked up, and on the wall she saw floating this tall, dark figure. And it then leapt, as she described it, leapt off the sort of the gate, the main sort of wall to the gate, and then disappeared. One thing that both of these have in common is that they both claim that the temperature significantly dropped. This is a massive thing during sort of paranormal encounters. When something's manifesting, the temperature will suddenly drop. And also both of the witnesses commented on the eyes, these red eyes, and this feeling of dread, and that this thing wanted to do serious harm. So in December of that year, Farrant decided he wanted to sort of go to the cemetery and host a vigil there to see if he could sort of figure out what on earth the witnesses had seen. And this was the first time that he'd been to the site in 2 years. Don't know why he'd been there previously. It didn't say in the research that I had been, but basically his purpose was to really to have a vigil there, and to, you know, try and sort of make sense in a way, try and find what the eyewitnesses saw. His two main suspicions were that it was an animal that had been sort of blown up and in the dark made to look like something else, than maybe it being a trick of the light that made it look bigger than it was. Or it was a person in a costume that had terrified them. So while he's walking through the cemetery, you know, he's finding lots of evidence of desecration. He's finding bones scattered. And in the middle of the path, he finds a dead fox. Now, he thinks this is really strange because obviously, you know, if an animal is, you know, injured, normally it will try and run away. But this was in the middle of the path. So he's thinking, okay, and he sees some strange puncture wounds on his neck. And he's thinking, right, okay, this is you know, this is probably an animal sacrifice. And so he's, you know, he's still walking through the cemetery trying to figure out what he's seen. And at about midnight, he passed the top of the gate. So he's like outside the cemetery at this point, so he's doing a round of he's done a round of the cemetery and he's now going out of the cemetery. So he's walking and he looks up sort of near the top of the gate, and he sees what he describes as a tall 7-foot figure with a cloak that was just floating, and it had these red eyes. Because he says the one thing he noticed was the face and the red eyes. And he sees this and he's like, okay, alright, this definitely isn't a person, and this definitely isn't an animal. And, you know, he's feeling the temperature drop, and then suddenly he's starting to feel drained of energy. And he realises that he's under intense psychic attack. And he describes this feeling during the psychic attack of feeling like he was in a dream, but he wasn't able to wake up. So after this, most people are probably like, oh my gosh, I'm getting out of here. I'll never, I don't want to do something like that again. I don't want to experience that again. However, he launched with the British Psychic and Occult Society, who say he founded himself, to try and get to the bottom of what this phenomenon was and see, you know, try and get to the bottom of what people were seeing, whether it was an entity, you know, a spirit at unrest, you know, just anything. And he also warned his members that were investigating with him, you know, do not try to make contact with this psychically, as it will attack you. It will psychically attack you quite intensely. Right, so like most people, so usually, you know, paranormal investigators will start with research. And what they found is that the figure that people had been seeing in the Highgate area for centuries and for years could actually be traced back to the Victorian era, where people were seeing a tall, dark figure. However, this time it was with a top hat, and they would see it around the Swades Lane Highgate Cemetery area, and then it would disappear through the gate into the cemetery. And, you know, there was also a local rumour. We've never been able to find any sort of evidence, but there were rumours that there was a castle that was also on the site. So, you know, they obviously wondered, could this possible castle that was possibly on the site, could that have something to do with it? However, the cemetery isn't the only place that this figure has been spotted. It has been spotted in a tavern across the road from the cemetery. It has been seen in another pub called the Gatehouse, I think it's called. It's been seen up Highgate Hill in Highgate Woods, and also in a council estate in the Highgate area, where an old nunnery used to be. Now you might think, okay, why have I suddenly just mentioned a nunnery? So basically, Highgate Cemetery and all of these places are sat on something that's called a ley line. Now, for those of you who don't know what ley lines are, I'll try and do a brief sort of thing of what a ley line is. So, you know, lots of places, like churches, are apparently built on these ley lines. I think Stonehenge is on one. think there are about, actually there might even be more than one ley line going through Stonehenge. I know there's a place in Lancashire, I think it is, called the Ancient Ram Inn, that I think is sat on at least 2 ley lines. But the one from Highgate Cemetery or to these places is just on the 1 ley line. And ley lines are basically something that is in the ground. It's a natural force that produces a psychic energy. And it's believed that when you sort of tap into the psychic energy, that's when like hauntings and stuff appear. So that's basically, you know, a brief description of what a ley line is. I also, while they were investigating this entity, you know, they had many investigations in the actual cemetery itself, and they believed that satanic rituals might have possibly, you know, done something to bring this entity back, because until the 1960s this entity had not been seen for years, and it was kind of when all the activity in the graveyard, people breaking in and, you know, doing satanic rituals and stuff. They think Farrant believes that they found in one of the tombs, it had been converted into a chapel, like a satanic chapel. So there were satanic symbols on the floor. I'm not going to say what these symbols are, but they were done in such a way that it was summoning something purely evil. And he believes that, you know, because this was no sort of, this was no like, you know, just kids messing about with stuff. This was an actual, like, satanic cult, a seasoned satanic cult that was doing this, and they would often actually find evidence of their rituals. And obviously it was in a graveyard, so they had bodies, so if they needed, like, I don't know what Josh is doing, but he's ruining the atmosphere. But it's so, because obviously they were in a graveyard. I don't know of, like, the rituals, because I don't go into that side of anything, because, yeah, that's a dark force that I don't want to deal with. But I know that, you know, sometimes they'll need blood, and obviously if you're in a graveyard, you know, you're going to get a good, you know, there isn't a shortage of bodies, so just saying. But yes, this seasoned satanic cult, they were obviously trying to or had conjured a very powerful demonic entity. And Farrant believes that because of the ley lines and because this thing hadn't been seen for years, that maybe that this cult had tapped into the psychic energy and managed to sort of resurrect this entity. Because, yeah. So, yeah, but like I say, they'd often find sort of evidence of their rituals, like black candles that had been burnt down, and bones and other things. So during Farrant's investigation, another man had been hearing reports of the same black figure, and his name was Reverend Sean Manchester. And like I say, he had heard of this dark figure in the Highgate area, and he was the head of the British Occult Society. There we are. So yeah, it's similar names. The British Occult and what was Farrant's? The British Psychic and Occult Society, and then you've got the British Occult Society, formed by Sean Manchester. And he was also founding his own sort of vampire finding society as well. And he was investigating in that area a couple of cases, or had investigated a couple of cases of vampirism, or people that were suspected of possibly turning into vampires. And one of these girls actually sleepwalked. And on one particular night, so he was in contact with the girl's sister, and he had said to her previously, oh, if she ever sort of gets up and starts walking about or anything, you know, you call me, you let me know, and I will come straight over. And on one of these nights, you know, she actually went into a trance-like state and started sleepwalking. And, you know, Manchester was actually investigating another thing at the time, and so he got the message secondhand. So he raced over to the house and he found a note on the door saying that they'd gone. So he followed the girls to sort of where he thought they would be. He got to the gates of the cemetery and they weren't there, so he started to look more around, and eventually he found them, and he saw the girl that was being afflicted managed to make her way into the cemetery through a gap in the fence, I guess, and she led them to an area in the cemetery called the Colubrium. I think that's how you pronounce it. And she was like outside one of the tombs, and he believed that this was the exact tomb that this entity was resting in. And, you know, he actually went quite public about this. And soon after this, with Farrant and Manchester investigating effectively the same thing, obviously the media blew up. And you know, he soon became the centre of the media attention. He gave an interview to a paper called the Hampstead and Highgate Express, and the article was called "Does a Vampire Walk in Highgate?" So they used, you know, they interviewed him about it, and they gave some of the stuff. So he believed that the vampire, and he believed this was very much a vampire, had been a man from Wachia, which is a place that's near Turkey, that stalked the Highgate area. And they claimed that, and the paper said that this person was a king vampire, which Sean Manchester denies ever saying that he used the word king vampire. So, you know, Farrant was asked to comment, and he basically said, you know, whatever it is, I am prepared to deal with it. And basically, during this time, really David Farrant and Shawn Manchester suddenly got into this massive feud and this big dislike of each other. And, you know, this even, you know, this went on until, you know, David Farrant died in April 2019. So this was a lifelong feud, basically. And this feud actually went public. So Farrant and Manchester were both being interviewed for on national telly. It was something that was being recorded for the national television. And they were commenting on, you know, the Highgate vampire. Because the Highgate vampire isn't actually anything that either of the men named. They never, like, called it, well, Farrant never called it a vampire. But, like, the moment that the media got hold of it, they suddenly went, there's a Highgate vampire! So that's where the name was born. But, like I say, this really sort of went national. And Manchester went as far as warning Farrant to stay away, saying he goes against our explicit wish for his own safety. Which in my mind basically sounds like you're trying to take all the glory. That you two are basically on the same thing and you want all the glory. And it is quite sad actually because, you know, Shawn Manchester did go on to write a book. And out of the two, I think Shawn Manchester is sort of, you know, seen as the person that dealt with all of it. And it's like, hey, hold on. You have this, like, famous person that's this semi-famous person that's, like, suddenly taking credit for, like, what this other guy was basically. Yes, you two were probably investigating things about the same time, but in different ways. So basically, in March of that year, Manchester actually returned to the crypt that they had previously investigated. So the crypt that the girl had stopped outside, they had at one point wanted to go in. However, the media had got wind that they were investigating and had got into the cemetery. So, yeah, they didn't manage to do what they needed to do. And they found that in the crypt that they believed the vampire was in, they found 3 coffins. And when they went back, there were only 2. So they thought, okay, something's happening. So they got the girl that had been, you know, under the attack. She led them to the columbarium, that one, the maze of crypts. Well, it's kind of like a coliseum, but it's like round, but obviously it's full of crypts and stuff. And yeah, he put her into this trance. And, you know, obviously they were confused, and then she just suddenly started walking and she stopped near this other crypt that was fairly close to the first one where they thought the vampire had been in. And she was just saying, "Where are you?" Like, she was looking for someone, or someone was calling for her, and she couldn't find them. So basically they got into the crypt. Okay. So they got into the crypt, And there was actually a list of names on the wall outside to say how many coffins should be there and the names of the people that were buried, that were in the crypt. And they got in and they suddenly found that there was an additional coffin all the way at the back. And so they went to the coffin that they suspected the vampire was in, and they opened the lid and removed it. And Sean Manchester describes as seeing a body that was neither dead or alive. And one of his assistants actually commented saying, you know, it must be freshly dead. And they just haven't got round, but there was no name on the coffin or anything. So Manchester was about to stake the coffin when one of his assistants stopped him saying, no, you can't do this. This is desecration. We need to go through the proper channels if you're to do this. And so they're having this debate, and in the end, they're like, Sean Manchester basically says, okay, we will go through the proper channels. So instead of replacing the lid, they take a crucifix and put it on the coffin. They get bags of garlic, and they also put jars of holy water in the four corners of the crypt, as well as putting a line of salt in the crypt, as well as at the doorway of the crypt. And they're like, okay, this is only a temporary measure, you know, until we can figure out what to do and stuff. We'll, you know, this will have to do. But basically, what happened is they went to the authorities of the graveyard, and they instructed to brick the vault up. And allegedly, the cement actually had like garlic mixed into it, and you know, his assistants were like, oh phew, thank God it's over. But Manchester wasn't so sure, and within a week he started to say that, you know, that this vampire had broken out. And like I say, before, you know, it had even been a week, the sightings had started again. So obviously it did nothing. Now, during this time, you know, basically people were taking Sean Manchester's side, and there were rumours that, yeah, and he had been found walking naked in Highgate cemetery, performing, you know, a ritual, and he had been like warned by the police to stay away and everything. But yeah, in the 1970s, he was actually imprisoned as he started sending voodoo dolls to the police and the press. They actually did a search of his house, and they found pictures of desecrated graves. So they arrested him for not only sending the voodoo dolls, but also for desecrating graves, which another man actually said, actually, I desecrated them. So he was arrested, and David Farron always, he admits that yes, he sent the voodoo dolls, but he never desecrated the graves. So, that's effectively the end of Farron at the moment, but Sean Manchester is still investigating the vampire, and it's been about 4 years since he's seen the coffin. And there were actually rumours of like a haunting in a house, which actually Farrant's men people were investigating. And of course, what happened? Yep, our friend Sean Manchester managed to track the vampire to said abandoned house, which was actually near the cemetery. So yeah, you kind of think that it's, with all this stuff that happens with Sean and with Sean Manchester and David Farrant, you kind of think that he is trying to like discredit Farrant and say he's a bad person and stuff, and try and take all the glory for himself. And basically they look around this house, they're proceeding with extreme caution, and they're sort of looking and they find a coffin, which miraculously Sean Manchester identifies as the exact same coffin that he saw 4 years previously. So they bring the coffin upstairs and to the back of the garden. And then, and during this time he actually instructs one of his men to grab his tools. So, like they say, they open the coffin and they see the creature, which is apparently it smells even worse than before. And apparently its nostrils were flaring like it was not happy to see them. And he says that he took the stake and as hard as he could whack, he staked it through where he thought its heart would be, and the chest deflated and there was this sort of ooze in the bottom of the coffin. And I should mention that this happened in broad daylight, so when vampires are said to be at their weakest. And basically they did that. They set the coffin alight, and the coffin allegedly burnt for hours. And then the sightings, according to Manchester, allegedly stopped. He had allegedly killed the vampire and everything was fine. However, Farrant claims that there are still sightings, and occasionally the odd sighting does pop up. And Farrant claims that the vampire is still out there, and he claimed this all the way until his death in April 2019. So that is the story of the Highgate vampire. I actually really enjoyed making this series. You know, thankfully I did like one more video than I did last year, because last year I only did 2 videos in this series and now I've done 3! I'm happy. I'm very happy. So yeah, you know, hopefully next year we'll be able to do, you know, 1 a week. Hopefully. She hopes. But yeah, it was so much fun to do this series. Thank you so much for everyone that has tuned in and watched this series. But yeah, leave your thoughts of if you think the vampire of Highgate Cemetery still lives. You know, if you think, you know, what you think of like David Farrant and Sean Manchester. And yeah, if you did like this video, please hit that like button, consider subscribing, and like I say, I'll leave a comment if you'd like. But yeah, this was so much fun. I loved it, and I just want to thank all of you for watching this series. But anyway, happy Halloween and stay safe. Bye.